Storyteller presents Ask Reddit question. What piece of junk did you find that turned out to be valuable? I found a small envelope with a few inches of wire in a junk shop. Bought it $2 because it had some faded penciling about troy ounce, turned out to about 1.5 troy ounces of platinum wire. Sold it for $600. Who's Troy? Abed's bestie. Troy and Abed in the morning. Nights. I still have a community coffee mug with their faces, and that phrase on it, haha. This guy's streets ahead. How did you find out it was platinum wire? He probably took it to a jeweler or pawn or coin shop because they often have metal testers, as they often buy precious metals. Years ago, I bought a condo in foreclosure. We couldn't go inside, just look from outside and put in a bid. My bid won. When I went inside the place, it was pretty trashed. I checked all the rooms, calculating the costs of getting it back into shape. At the end of my walkthrough, I went into the garage and saw there was a car under a tarp. I pulled the tarp back and saw a 1972 Barracuda in nearly mint condition. What was required to get ownership of the title in that situation? The home and all of its contents were part of the foreclosure agreement. I took that paperwork to DMV and put the car in my name, paid some back taxes and registration, and then sent it to the local car guy to get it detailed. Pretty easy. Any reason as to why the previous owners just abandoned a perfectly fine car? I never got an explanation. But I do remember the lady who did the foreclosure proceedings saying something like, well, you got a condo, but you also got that junky old car. Junky old car? Wow it. The people who end up responsible for disposing of things owned by other people or companies don't always put much effort into evaluating it all. 99% is junk, and their profit is in getting it all processed and converted to cash with the minimum possible time and cost. They do it with a reason. If they're known for inventoried lots where everything is exactly as described, nobody would bid unless it's a good deal at that price. It's the element of mystery and other people having big finds that keeps them bidding. So it's these guys we have to blame for loot boxes. Everyone's singing Barracuda by heart in their head after reading that. Bum ba da 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 bum. Da woo ee woo ee. Yep, I am part of everyone this time. Oh my god. You lucky fucking bastard. Any pics of the car? I am hoping it's that plum crazy purple. I was going to post about a guitar amp I bought from an old lady, but after your Barracuda story it just seems pointless. Congrats. I am not much of a car person, so I can't really gauge how valuable that is. How much does it go for? I know 1972 is old, so it must be high. It's just a very cool car and very collectible. It's probably worth around $50,000. Maybe more. It's insured for $100,000. I've seen them sell at auction for much, much more. I just looked it up and saw people selling mint ones for $80 to $120K, and you're right, it is a damn cool looking car. Those cars normally have the original factory V8 with matching numbers and low mileage. Barrett-Jackson is also notorious for playing reruns of the same old auctions from the year prices went insane. Car tax. I want to see this sweet thing. A first or second edition of the Oregon Trail book. It's a bit damaged, so not that valuable, but still a few hundred more than the $15 I paid for it. But now you have dysentery. Found a fake Cartier watch in Goodwill for $10. Bought it because it still looked nice. But it's a real Cartier watch and it's worth $1,000 plus. Keeping it because I'd never buy myself something like that. I'd never buy myself something like that. But you did, albeit for $10. Reddit 1 Internet Guy 0. How did you know it was real? Hoping something like that will happen to me, lol. Having worked on them for 3 years, I recommend studying the kerning in the logo. Counterfeiters seem to have real problems recreating that for some reason, and getting your hands on an original to feel the weight distribution. Pop into a store and ask to try one on. The weight is usually the biggest giveaway of a counterfeit, as fakes only have to appear real. Dad carried around a junk guitar for 50 years. Ugly as hell sunburst Gibson acoustic circa 50s or 60s, can't remember, that he eventually sanded down into something prettier. When I was learning, he took it to be tuned up by our neighbor who owned a shop and was a collector. Dude came back exasperated and told us that my dad had sanded about $50K off the guitar, and that it would have been totally worthless if he hadn't left the logo on. I got to sand it and was grimacing pretty hard, not going to lie. So was our poor neighbor. I'd never seen someone sad cringe before that moment. Well, your dad upped the value of all the other ones at least a little. At least it sounds like the neighbor was the most shocked party. Sounds like your dad just loved that guitar and wasn't necessarily considering selling it. It seems priceless to him, but I dunno, maybe not. How did he react? Oh yeah, that guitar hasn't gone anywhere. It was given to him by his father figure when he was young, and it's been with the family ever since. He was just like, oh dude, that's sick, can't believe I fucked up that bad. It's since become a fun party story for him to tell. I have an old Gibson Hummingbird that I inherited from my grandfather when he died. I've played it regularly ever since I got it decades ago. It's still in the original case he got with it when he bought it back in the 50s, and it sounds a dream. No idea what monster would take a sander to something like this. I found a very small, round piece of metal on the floor in my workplace. I couldn't figure out what the item was and knew I should just discard it, but felt compelled to keep it for some reason. That afternoon my co-worker was distraught. The unique type of battery that her cochlear implant needed fell out, and was probably in a dumpster somewhere because the cleaners had come through. I gave her the weird piece of metal in my pocket, and she almost burst into tears from relief. Either that or she was crying because she thinks I am the type of person to steal batteries from cochlear implants. She saw, but never heard it coming. Well, she could have heard it coming. She definitely would not have heard it going. Reminds me of when my wristwatch got ripped from my arm playing football on grass. The pin that holds the band to the clock part flew out, and I managed to find it in the grass in under 5 minutes. Man, now every time I see a random piece of metal I'll think of this and keep it. Old folded up piece of paper in the bottom of a box my dad had I found cleaning up the house, torn up and faded. Turned out to be a 90-year-old original Jean Carla poster worth roughly $20. 000 after spending $1,000 for restoration. What kind of restoration is available for a poster? Tear repair, flattening, infills, stain fading, white bleaching, acidity removal, tape removal, etc. You know. Poster stuff. Well, a dickhead couch surfer who crashed in my guest room for a few months, left behind a 1970s Fender Super Twin Tube amp worth $1,800 he didn't know about. It made cleaning up his piss bottles worth it. Please tell me you played it. The piss bottles. I played Africa by Toto on them. It was magical. Those are not the rains to bless. Are you the same person that posted on another sub about this couch surfer who lived in your guest room with a functioning attached bathroom, and still pissed in bottles and kept them in his room? Yes. How I think I read another one of your comments about this guy recently. Decent trade-off. It was. Someone gave me a hideous purse out of a box on its way to Goodwill. I sold it on eBay for $1, I've had some good flips, but that was the best. Was it some expensive brand or something? I know purses can get expensive but assumed not much resale value. Depends on the brand like you said. Louis Vuitton's special editions and Hermes can actually appreciate in value. Friend purchased a Hermes Birkin for $60,000 and resold it for $75,000 3 years later. Since then she's been trying to get her hands on the Himalaya, but her husband said no, it's $500 K plus. I like to think of myself as a good man, but a $500,000 handbag could definitely tempt me to try my luck at mugging. You sound like her brother. He told her the same thing. I saw a woman walk away from her LV Murakami cherry blossom bag. This is not just LV, this is also a legit piece of art. And she left it in her cart and walked 50 away. I told my husband cameras didn't even enter the equation. I had a moral discussion with myself and I told myself no. Then after the fact, when sanity reared its head again, I would definitely have been caught on camera. Fuck me, what does your friend do for a living? Buy and resell limited edition merchandise. Sister does that on eBay. Makes a killing on shoes, purses, and recently perfume. She's an attorney and he is an engineer. Budget. Well, budget actually is $3 million this time for real. Leather maintained well will last a very long time, and the high level of build quality usually keeps the price high. I think it would be similar to high-grade guitar where 60 years after the build date you have not only a working instrument, but one that plays incredibly well. Same thing applies for dead stock shoes. Shoes is almost like a stock market. Weird painting of a cat with birds on its back no one wanted. Paid $20, worth $400. Investments on paintings happen like that. My mom got a painting for $300, but after a while, it now costs $15,000. She is waiting to sell it. My mom thought she did. Bought a ton of stuff done by her fav artist. Kept saying she got it at a steal, and it was worth way more. Artist got screwed when he got Alzheimer's and people took advantage somehow, I don't remember, but now his work isn't worth anything. Do you have some pictures of the artwork? I have a fascination when it comes to artists and Alzheimer's. I don't, unfortunately. But look up Peter Max. My mom was told by an appraisal company last year that unless her pieces were original acrylic on canvas that they were essentially worthless. She has signed lithographs. A few years ago, I was looking through the Goodwill website that lets you bid on stuff that you find. I stumbled across one of the Texas Goodwill's pages, and then saw an auction for a huge box of phone accessories that no one was bidding on. I started looking through all the pictures, started researching some of the brands, and started realizing the whole box was worth a decent bit. I took a shot and made my bid. Someone else saw what I saw and started a bidding war with me, but I eventually won with a bid of $106, then $24 for shipping. Few days go by and I finally get the box, well, 2 boxes, and they were both huge. Started taking inventory and ended with 100 iPhone chargers, 100 Android chargers, about 250 iPhone 8 cases in all different styles, 80 battery packs, a few iPad cases, and about 1,000 screen protectors. Turned my $130 total investment into an eBay business, and made almost $8,000 in about 9 months. Edit. A word. Shop Goodwill has a lot more watchers than it used to, and they do a much better job of price checking stuff. It's kind of unfortunate. I agree, and that's most of the reason I don't really use it anymore. If you were persistent enough, you used to be able to find amazing deals. This goes for a lot of auctions now, honestly. Typical not me but a friend. She found a copy of a Salvador Dali painting at Goodwill. She loved him, and it was a big print, so she grabbed it for like $20. She took it home and took it out of the old junky frame, and it had a stamp of authenticity on the back, and she had it assessed, and it's worth $20K, lucky bitch. My mom did the same thing, except hers was a Tabuena painting, and she found it for $2 and sold it for around $15K. My friends and I were at a concert and found this broken bracelet under a merch table as we were about to leave the venue. It had an interesting engraving on it, something about being a son and friend. Because it was broken, we were thinking about just tossing it, but ended up throwing it in our backpack to bring to the office later. My friend worked at the venue, so she was going to turn it in. The next week I was browsing Reddit on a thread of the same kind of music we were listening to at the show, and just as I was about to fall asleep, someone's post caught my eye. It said something like, "This is a long shot, but I lost something." And it piqued my interest, so I clicked it. It was someone from that same show asking if anyone had found a silver bracelet. Turns out it was the same one we found, and it seemed to be a special gift from the person's parent, and they were looking for it. We connected and got the bracelet returned to the guy, and the whole interaction is actually in my Reddit history. It's a fun albeit quick read. Link. Here you go. Web address. That's cool. It's not often this stuff happens on Reddit. My mom in college worked for a small grocery store. She was sweeping aisles one day when she found a bracelet, and just threw it in the lost and found for someone to come back for later. Months went by, and I guess the employees got to check the lost and found for anything they wanted if no one claimed it. She remembered the bracelet and just grabbed it. She got it home and cleaned it up. It ended up being a Tivol bracelet wrapped with real diamonds. It's since been turned into a new wedding band for her, LOL. Now that's a lucky find. Now that I am thinking about it, I kind of feel bad for the person who lost it. People legitimately leave their car keys at stores and never bother calling to see. I don't know how people are always leaving car keys places and then leave the store, but there's always one set. If they cared, they should have called the store, so no need to feel bad. Bought a cheap Martin guitar because I was broke and wanted to play. I didn't think much of it at the time, but it's worth a few grand now because it was a limited edition thing. It's still appreciating to the point where I had to insure it. Martins tend to have a great sound, or at least every one I've ever played. So my family went to a nearby town's vintage sale thing. My dad found this dirty old glass milk bottle, and he got excited when he found it. I didn't know what he found so exciting since it was just a milk bottle. After we got home, he explained that it was a milk bottle from a dairy farm. One of the co-founders of that farm was my great-great-grandfather on my dad's side. When one of the world wars began, he sold it off to the other founder. TLDR, my dad found a glass milk bottle, and I found out I am a descendant of wealthy dairy farmers. Not much monetary value, but a lot of emotional value. Wholesome. I was at an estate sale and bought a few paintings. Sweet lady told me to take the last one I liked as package deal since I ran out of cash. Turns out one of them is a pretty rare original print worth about $3,500, and I paid maybe $30 for all four prints and paintings I wanted. My aunt died, cancer, tragic. My family did what they always do. Go into mine mode. There was a tiny painting I always liked. I asked my cousin, she could have cared less. She's got to have the 10-year-old Buick. Fight. The painting is worth a crazy amount. The car is in the dump now. I will have the painting forever. No offense, but this kind of reads like in Japan, heart surgeon. From The Office. Steady hand. All these stories about paintings turning out to be worth a lot of money is making me want to go and buy random paintings. It's a conspiracy by Big Painting. When I was younger, I would rummage around the drawers and cabinets in my grandmother's house, just adventuring and discovering, which is what I called it. I happened to find this old folded piece of paper, but it only took 3 seconds for me to just disregard it and push it aside. I think I was trying to get something else that I saw. After I finished with whatever I had, I picked up the piece of paper to throw it away. Out of childlike curiosity, I opened it up and saw the words in it. It looked like a letter. It seemed important, so I gave it to my grandmother, who gave it to my mother when she came to pick me up. My grandmother is blind. Come to find out, it was a love letter from my grandfather to my grandmother. That really made their day. Edit. Some of y'all need to chill. I was 3 years old. My grandmother and grandfather, who isn't blind, were fine with me doing that, as long as I cleaned up after myself. I didn't give her hell. She isn't some stereotypical poor old blind grandma. She has the hearing of a bat and a hand of iron. My mom once threw out 100 or 200 guilders Dutch valuta before the euro. Anyhow, it's a lot of money, or so as toddler, because she was super into tidying up the place, and had no concept of what the hell money even was, so she saw a piece of paper that my grandparents had abandoned and threw it out, just before they went on holiday. So my grandparents were like, fuck, where'd we put the money? Stress. Luckily my grandma found it in the bin, somehow. A really old dollar bill I found in an old Bible. It's worth around $100. I found a misprint $1 bill that had 2 zeros after the 1. Turns out it's worth about $100. I was staying at a hotel with some colleagues, and somehow the conversation turned to taking about how some people will leave money in hotel Bibles for people. One of my friend's partners was skeptical, turned over the Bible in the room, and out floated a $1. The Bible's for chopping lines, the bill is for railing them. Well, if my mom were to respond to this thread. Original Harry Potter First Edition Philosopher's Stone novel. It's very rare to find them, and they sell pretty well, but she threw it out. So salty. Why would she throw that book out at all? Same reason moms across the world threw away first edition Charizard Pokemon cards. They hate investment. I found a book at a trash bin. The Wind in the Willows. I never got to read it as a kid. After finishing it, I googled the edition date. Turns out it's a collectible worth $300. Who knew? Was fishing at family's cottage, pulled up a fishing rod. Woke, turned out to be the one my grandfather passed away got as a birthday present and loved it, but lost about 8 years ago. My father-in-law goes junking occasionally for side cash and strange gifts. One day he shows up randomly with a first-gen Fatboy PS3 with backwards compatibility. He goes, "Hey, I don't know if you can use this, but I thought you might enjoy it." Somebody had it sitting out for garbage. I fired it up fully expecting to have to do some repairs, but it booted up and plays just fine. He refused to take any money for it. He can be a real stand-up guy. Staples put a couple copies of AutoCAD LT on clearance for like $4.90 each. I made almost $1,000 on eBay for them. That's insane. What a find. Must have been a while ago, I expect. It's been subscription for a long time now. Bought an old copy of The Wizard of Oz at a flea market for $30. When I got home and researched it more, it turned out to be a first edition. How much is it worth? $31. Cleaning out my grandparents' house after my grandma passed away, and had to throw out or donate actual hundreds of books. Most were worth nothing and very worn down. In the second to last box were original copies of the Harry Potter books. She bought each one on the day of their release. Did that include edition 1, i.e. the first book? I think he means first edition, first printing. The very first book I am sure belongs to the publisher or author. A couple years ago I bought a rifle bipod at an antique store for like $15. I was going to keep it for an airsoft gun, but it didn't have any markings on it and couldn't figure out what it was, so I made a post on a gun forum asking for info. Turns out I bought a 65-ish-year-old bipod for an experimental version of the M14 rifle. There were only about 5 of my bipod ever made, and the guys sent me pictures from a rifle museum backing it all up. I sold it a day later for $400, but they told me if I found the right buyer it'd be worth $800 to $1,000. That's pretty crazy. When I was young I got to see a guy shoot the only Panker jackhammer combat shotgun in existence. I didn't realize that that gun is worth more than he'll ever make. Saw someone selling a copy of Chrono Trigger for SNES about 20 years ago. It was a great price and dude said for another $10 he'd throw in a bunch of other games he didn't want, including Star Fox. I was trying to start a collection at the time and figured he'd give me a box of sport games and shit you usually see filling pawn shops etc., but I figured it's $10 so agreed. He gave me the box and thanked me for taking all the crap off his hands. I got in the car and looked through the games and there was a bunch of bad sports games and a few other meh games, but in amidst it all was this game that said Star Fox Weekend on it. I was like, WTF is that? Check eBay and the thing was selling for like $300 at the time. It's like a rare SNES cartridge they gave out to winners of a competition, or to other people who won one from Nintendo Power etc. I couldn't bring myself to bring it back or tell him. 10 years later, I saw some lady on Craigslist looking for a copy of Chrono Trigger for her son for Christmas. I emailed her that I had it, and when she came to grab it I just gave it to her for free to pay back the karma of getting that super rare game in a $10 box of junk. The thing goes for like $1,000 on eBay now. I can't find my SNES, and it's driving me nuts. So many games. FF3, SMRPG, SMW, Mario Kart. I could probably replace them all without breaking the bank completely, but I am not sure I even want to. When I was a little kid I liked to climb under and hide inside the racks of clothes when my mom was shopping. One time I found what I thought was one of those cheap 25-cent plastic rings that you put a quarter into the machine and it spits out. I think that was basically my only understanding of what a ring was at that age, but I showed my mom what I had found, and as it turns out it was a massive diamond engagement ring. I specifically remember that it had tape around it, which my mom explained was probably because it was too big, and whoever was wearing it was trying to make it more snug to their finger. We gave it to the teenager girls who were working the cash register, hoping the person who lost it would return looking for it, and it would get returned. My mom says she kind of regrets doing that because she thinks that the girls probably pawned it and split cash. Probably should have taken it to the police or something, but who knows? I like to think that it did make its way back to the rightful owner. Found some sunglasses in a parking lot covered in dirt. Washed them off and they turned out to be Ray-Bans. It was a pretty good day. I too found some Ray-Ban sunglasses while riding around. I have a main pair of sunglasses that I wear, but these found Ray-Bans are still my backups for 5+ years now. In 2004 my grandfather showed me a locked chest in the storage of his home when I was 15. Then he said to me the key is on my cabinet. They promised me to open it when he dies. I kept his promise until he died this January 2020. He died at 101 years old. I got the keys of the locked chest on his cabinet, then opened the chest. When I opened it, the things in there were mostly love letters, encyclopedias, maps, records from famous singers. But the valuable thing I found was jewelry and a Rolex and Seiko watch, which is under perfect condition. He dropped some loot for you, brew. When I was 17, I found a driver's license on the ground from a guy who was 22 and resembled me a fair bit. Rarely had a problem getting into bars or clubs with it. It was priceless, TBH. My friend did this years ago in college. At some point later in the year, he was pulled over and had forgotten to swap his real ID back into his wallet after a night out and got pulled over. Gave the cop the fake ID on accident and got into a whole lawsuit for identity fraud or theft or some shit. Why didn't he just say he found it that night and he was going to turn it in the morning? Not exactly junk, but I bought 2 vintage Pyrex bowls at a thrift store. Had no idea that style's actually collectible. I just needed a mixing bowl, and they were the same kind my mom had, so I knew they were good, sturdy bowls. Not sure exactly how much they're worth, but definitely more than the $10 or so I paid for the pair. A relative of mine shops for dishes and sells them to a specific company that pays people to basically find unique or highly sought after items for them. Think single pieces that are missing from someone's set, that kind of thing. My relative will go to places like Goodwill, etc. and find, for example, 8 specific plates for $2 each, and then sell them to the company for $20 or $30 per plate. Started as a hobby and now is making like $25,000 a year just doing it on the side. I am honestly interested in this. Do you know the company? I visit thrift stores regularly and have a love of vintage dishes, so this is right up my alley. Yep. The older Pyrex are better because the material used is of better or higher quality. The newer Pyrex baking dishes often shatter when in use. Good grab. Newer Pyrex has a tendency to explosively shatter when it is hot, like out of the oven, and comes in contact with even a tiny amount of water. Just a few drops on your counter can cause it to explode. Lowercase Pyrex is still the good glass. Bought a 1970s Roland TR-66 drum machine granddaddy to the 808 for $7 at a flea market. All analog and made some cool noises. Had a lot of fun with it. Turns out it's worth several $100s or something. It had colorful buttons but cheesy wood grain sides and back. We had it stashed away in the garage for a bit with some shitty thrift store speakers, also wood grain. One day when we cleared out junk, my dad tossed it, while for some unknown reason keeping the speakers. Needless to say, I was a little pissed. Well, easy come easy go. Roland is always a good buy. They made so many cutting-edge pieces of music equipment that were so past their time that a bunch of musicians now are buying them up and experimenting with analog. I do a lot with reggae and dub. My plight into an RE 201 or 301 if I could get my hands on are insane. I saw a 201 walk into a Guitar Center for absolute mint condition, and it sold in 2 hours for $1,000, surprisingly underpriced. Still kicking myself in the ass for not having the cash to buy it. I even tried to pull the seller aside knowing he was going to only get a 50% cut, and he never called me back. Moral is, if you see Roland, especially analog, hold on to it. This is an incredible documentary of their creative catalog. My family Bible. It disappeared for a while. Years ago a sibling of mine passed away. I was helping her children clean out her attic when I stumbled upon a box filled with old books. I was going through them and found one that was tattered and in rough shape. I was about to toss it aside when I decided to open up. Turns out it was the family Bible with a filled-out family tree going back to the early 1700s. Quite the find, indeed. It's still in my possession. Would you believe my paternal grandfather was born in 1805? I would not have known that exact date had I not found it. My siblings. Turns out organs are actually pretty expensive. Retro video game consoles or games and electronics. I love them because I love them, but they are often very valuable as well. I used to buy these things way before it was popular. Like buying a full Sega Genesis, Sega CD, 32X, and a ton of games for like $40 back in the day. Nowadays that shit is a gold mine. That's pretty cool. I am not really sure why these are so scarce in North America and not sure about other regions like Europe. In Japan, you can find a lot of second-hand retro consoles for sale in most major cities. People just tossed them for a couple decades. Over here it was largely about the new and shiny for the past 30 years. It is only the last, say, 5 or 6 years that the retro scene has really taken off. But by now, most people sold off or threw out their old consoles. Western gamers were all about best graphics for a long time, so old consoles weren't valued. Nowadays we realize that the quality of the game has nothing to do with how new it is. About 22 years ago I found a ring in a parking lot, gave it to the cops for 90 days, and nobody asked about it. It turned out to be worth over $1,000. Then last year I found a ring in a parking lot, gave it to the cops for 90 days, and nobody asked about. It turned out to be worth $40. I also was dicking around in a random old gold mine when I was around 12 and found a pretty decently sized nugget that was worth $1,800, but I carried it around in my pocket for good luck. Then I lost it. Oh well. I also found a fair few bits of jade in a river, probably a few $100s worth, but I gave them out to friends. And my last decent find was 2 fossilized vertebrae of some sort. Sent them to the aquarium to have them examined. They are about 7 million years old and a dolphin relative. Apparently worthless, but I really like them. They are in my fish tank. Do you live somewhere where everything is valuable? All different places. 1 ring in DC, 1 in Tornga, NZ. Gold mine was in Colorado. Jade was in NZ South Island, Fiordland. And the vertebrae were in one of the Carolinas, either Charleston or Outer Banks, can't quite remember. Wow! You are still with us. Thanks for being such a nice person. As long as you are here, why not like this video and subscribe to our channel? Also you can press the bell icon, so you won't miss any future uploads.